let's talk about a bit about the moment that kind of saved you, pressing your own ejection button or pulling the handle. Can you kind of talk us through just a little bit of the confusion and how you knew that you'd been struck and kind of what that feeling when the canopy rips off feels like?
Yeah, thanks for having me on again, Ruth. I mean, obviously, I've ejected, and all of the stories in the book are about the history of ejection, but the notion that ejecting is your last chance at life. It's your last chance to save your life. And so for me, it happened for me when my pilot and I were flying a Tornado. I was the backseat navigator. The aircraft was hit by a heat-seeking surface-to-air missile on the first day of the first Gulf War in Iraq in 1991. The aircraft's tumbling, it's on fire. My pilot manages to get hold of the aircraft, but the flames are starting to spread around where we're sitting, and there's no option. Ejecting is the last chance to save your life. That's the whole premise of what I'm talking about. But so I pulled the yellow and black handle. I don't know, your listeners can't see it, Ruth, but obviously I can show you. I've got a yellow and black handle in my office, and it's a D ring, and it's knurled so your hand doesn't slip off it, and you give it a good old yank as hard as you can. People have dislocated their shoulders because you are a matter of seconds, sometimes hundredths of a second from dying. And technology takes over, and it takes over in just 1/100th of a second. And that feels like a lifetime. But then it all starts to happen. The Perspex cockpit hood is blasted away on a rocket motor. So you're left open to the outside world. Your arms are dragged in on restraining straps. Your legs are dragged in on restraining straps. Your shoulder harness tightens to hold you into the seat. The rocket motors in the seat fire. You accelerate from 0 to 200 miles an hour upwards under 18 times the force of gravity in about 3/4 of a second. And it all happens automatically. And then the seat itself continues to work. It stabilizes once you're out of the aircraft, stops it tumbling. It then continues its job. It cuts you away from its grasp. It cuts your harness away, cuts your restraints away, and it falls away from you. Its last act of saving your life is as it falls away, the devices pull your own personal parachute out. And so you end up going from a burning jet to floating down in silence. And that process that I've just bored you with for 3 minutes takes 2.5 seconds. And that's it. And you don't remember a thing about it.
I'm not going to blow smoke at you, John, but I'm telling you, there is not a single person that was listening to you talking about that who was bored. And in terms of the book itself, you've talked about the kind of technology. This is a really far cry. This idea, this automation, this idea that you pull one handle and the chair the chair rips off the canopy, the chair rockets itself up, the chair stabilizes itself, the chair cuts you away, the chair pulls your parachute. That's not the way it's always been. And some of the people that have pioneered this, that have designed it, who've engineered it, who've tested it, my God, test pilots in the olden days, geez, what brave men they were.
Really, and one of the reasons that the ejection seat came into being was because so many test pilots in the 1940s were being killed. And so my description of my ejection was in 1991 on a Mark 10 Martin Baker ejection seat. If we go back to 1949 and Joe Lancaster, so I am the 6,089 Martin Baker ejectee. Joe Lancaster was number 1. And I was lucky enough to know Joe really well and interview him for the book before he sadly died a couple of years ago.
There's a lovely picture of you with him at what I assume is a dinner in October 2017 in the book. I'll hold up for those that are watching on YouTube or in Vision. There you go. There's a lovely picture of him. Here we go, down here. What a brave guy he was.
Really, really nice guy. And for your listeners or your viewers who can see, Joe's wearing his Distinguished Flying Cross on his lapel. He was a World War II bomber pilot, a very brave man. But he went on to be a test pilot. He was flying an experimental aircraft. He was sitting on a Mark 1 ejection seat. So, and his aircraft went out of control. And when I spoke to him, he said, when we first saw these things, we thought they were curious contraptions. And he said they were damn bloody dangerous, if I could use that word on the radio, Ruth. He said they were damn dangerous, and we just didn't really trust them. They didn't know what they were. What they basically were is a metal chair, a metal seat with a bomb under it. And so Joe's ejection process, I told you mine, which was automatic, 2.5 seconds. Joe had to, when his aircraft went out of control, had to manually get rid of the canopy, so the canopy blasted off. He then pulled a red handle down so a mask came over his face to protect him. The bomb in the seat went off, and the bomb simply blew him out of the cockpit like a champagne cork. And that was more or less the job of the seat over. That's what it did back then. A little parachute came out to help stabilize the seat, but Joe is now at 3,500 feet, tumbling through the air in this seat with the sky and then the lakes and then the river and then the grass, tumbling at 300 miles an hour. Joe then has to, whilst all of this is happening, after the bomb going off, has to reach to find the harness on his chest, because he's got two harnesses, as we'll find out. He has to be careful to unscrew the right harness, press it, unstrap himself from the seat, pull all the straps away, push the seat away, and then he goes into free fall himself. He then has to bring his hands back round again as he's in free fall, plummeting towards the earth. He has to find his parachute harness and his D-ring, and he has to pull his own D-ring to release his own parachute. And then Joe floats down to safety in silence. The process Joe undertook was just over 30 seconds. And that's the astonishing development, Ruth, from the seat of the 1940s to the one I used. And the one now, if you can just bear it, is so clever, is so automatic, the newest seat. It's connected to the aircraft computer control, and the seat can make the decision on its own to eject the pilot without further reference. So if the seat thinks the pilot faces mortal danger, the seat will eject the pilot, and the first they might know in certain circumstances is that they're floating down under a parachute. And that's the seat in a nutshell. It took kind of 155,000 words to tell that story, but I've just done it in a couple of minutes.
Now, I mean, we've talked about the mechanism both in the 40s and in the 90s, and now onto how technology has developed even further. But that's obviously not the end of the story, and it wasn't the end of the story for you, because once you floated down to the earth, you find that you're across enemy lines in a foreign country. You don't know, in terms of mapping, necessarily exactly where you are. And obviously somebody knows where you are because they've launched a surface-to-air missile that knocks you out the sky. So when did you discover that you were going to be a prisoner of war? And also, you know, that crump when you hit the ground, do you have a standard operating procedure for what you're supposed to do then?
I knew we were going to... We hoped that we wouldn't be captured. We hoped that we might get rescued. And again, the depth of the stories in the book, that notion of a journey. One of the guys I was shot down with, who was a friend of mine, who I talk about in the book, he was in a Top Gun aircraft, an F-14. He was shot down and captured. His pilot was shot down and rescued, and they ejected a hundredth of a second apart. So for me, hitting the ground, standing up, that was the next part of my journey of my ejection. And there was fear, there was confusion, there was hope, and a realization that we were probably going to be captured. And that's what everybody went through. You know, so I tell stories from Korea, the Korean War, the Falklands War, the Vietnam War, with people ejecting, some being rescued, some getting away, Serbia, the Kosovan War. And that's the next part of the ejection journey. Do you survive the next part of your journey? We were captured, as your listeners might remember, myself and John Peters, pretty poorly treated and paraded on TV, but we were released at the end. So, you know, the ejection seat saved my life. I just checked before we came on air, and Martin Baker ejection tally now is 7,697 as of 2 days ago, when somebody ejected in America. That's all of those lives saved.
Is that the only company that makes them in the West?
No, it's not, Ruth. No, it's not. So that's the British company. They make seats for aircraft around the world, but Americans make some for their own forces. The Russians do, the Chinese do. So that's 7,697 is all the only figure we know for sure, because nobody else keeps records. But you can say that there are in the many tens of thousands of lives saved. And it's not just those lives, Ruth, as I talk about in the book. It's if your life is saved and you return to your loved ones, it's then the children that arrive after that, and then your grandchildren. And even just Martin Baker estimate that they could probably fill a couple of Wembleys with the amount of lives that are still in existence, because of their ejection seats. And it's that, as I say, it's a second chance at life. Or for some people who eject 2 or 3 or 4 times, it's a third, fourth, fifth chance at life.
I mean, I have to say, I can't imagine that if I'd had to eject myself out of a fast jet, I'd be that keen to get back in one. But I guess it's kind of like people that fall off a horse. You want to get back on as quickly as you can. For you to have spent several years as a prisoner of war in Abu Ghraib, not the nicest prison camp in the world. I mean, what on earth made you want to stay in the RAF, and what on earth made you want to get back into a flying machine again?
Well, I mean, I was a prisoner of war for 7 weeks, and it was 7 weeks of hell, don't get me wrong. But people had a lot worse. One guy in the book was shot down in Vietnam and captured, and he was a prisoner of war in Vietnam for 5.5 years. And that was 5.5 years of brutality. And he came back an almost a wrecked man to his family. Why did I want to go flying? Same as anybody else. It's the job, Ruth. It's what you do. If you're a copper and you end up going to a pub fight on a Friday night, or a firefighter and you get burnt in a building, you don't just say, right, I'm stopping my job. For me, I wanted to go back. I wanted to go back because it was my job. I loved my job. It's kind of exciting flying fighters, to be perfectly honest. And I wanted to show, in actual fact, that because my first war had been such a failure, a disaster.
Yeah, I was about to say, presumably, I know military people, and presumably you got absolute mince ripped out of you for being shot down day one, flying one. That's a bad day out for all concerned.
Yeah, you know that there was no quarter given when I returned. Yeah. You got the slap on the back. Yeah, well done, mate. Now, how did you manage to mess that up so badly? But it was you're part of a team. You're part of the environment. That means you want to get back, and you want to get back to prove that you can continue to do the job. To be perfectly honest, I'd taken the Queen's shilling as it was then for 15 years, and she deserved repayment with my service. Sounds a bit trite, but it's real. It's what I trained to do. But that journey for me was astonishing. I'm alive today because of it. And so many people are alive because of that yellow and black handle, that ejection seat, that life-saving device that somebody decided to invent back in 1943, 1944.
Now let's fast forward to the conflicts that are happening in the world right now. There is a big argument, as you know, over whether the UK should send its fast jets to Ukraine so that the Ukrainian Air Force can patrol its own skies. Where do you stand on that?
I think that, the Ukrainians have done an astonishing job. If you'd have said, was it April last year, I think it started, Ruth. If you'd have said they would still be
February,
fighting,
but yeah, it was just over a year ago.
You're quite right. It's coming up to 15 months. I mean, nobody expected Ukraine to persevere. They just didn't. The Russian machine is so incredible. And that they have persevered is telling the rest of the world's military a really important thing. The Russian is not the bear that we once feared. It's being held back. Now, to be fair, it's being held back by a lot of Western technology and help. There's no doubt about that. Would aircraft help? Yes, they would. But the training process for, we don't really have, we could give them some of our old Typhoons. We don't have any Tornadoes anymore. We don't really have many aircraft that we could realistically give them, some old about Typhoons. But I think that if we were going to do it, it probably should have happened 12 months ago, because it's going to take months and months and months to train them. I think that if we're going to do it, the option certainly would be the F-16, because there's so many of them around the world, and it's not easy, but it is somewhat more easy. I'm going to use the word easy to operate and to fly, but it still takes a long time. But because of the delays, we've only just given them Storm Shadow missiles. We only started to deliver the Challenger tanks. If we'd have done that 12 months ago, you might have seen a very different outcome in Ukraine. But Ukraine is, in many ways, is showing the world that a determined force defending their homeland is a very, very potent force indeed, with all of the technical help that we're giving.